are listening to the Bold Action Taker podcast with Kirsty Knight. I'm your host, Kirsty, and this is the podcast to help you up-level your self-belief, self-confidence, and self-discipline so you've got the courage to take bold action in your business, become your most productive self, and achieve your boldest money goal yet. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 1. Okay, so you would not believe how much drama I had about what to do for this first episode, which is so ironic, right? Because here I am recording a podcast that is going to help you if you struggle with perfectionism and procrastination and not taking action on certain things in your business. And that was exactly what was showing up for me in the writing of this episode. But in a way, it was perfect. Because I don't want you to be under the illusion that once you learn the strategies and tools that I'm going to teach to help you get things done more quickly and to spend less time procrastinating and perfecting, that you stop being human. Because even though I know this stuff and I use it and I help my clients with it, and there are some things that I can just plow ahead with without procrastinating and perfecting, and I can get loads done, sometimes it still catches me off guard. The good news, though, is that you do become more aware of it. Some behaviours do happen less often. And once you spot those behaviours that pop up again, you do know how to move past it. So as soon as I realised I was procrastinating on writing this first episode, I did just that. And I did get it done. But regardless of what others might tell you in this industry, and regardless of what you learn, your brain will still try to avoid certain things. And that isn't because there is something wrong with you and that you are broken. It's actually because your brain is working perfectly. So you might be thinking, well, that's not ideal. If our brain's default mode is to avoid certain things, then how can I get myself to take action on the things I know I avoid? And the simple answer is that we can manipulate our environment in such a way as to make it easier for ourselves to take action on certain things. And if we know a bit about how the brain works, we can work with it rather than against it to overcome its natural tendency. So the work to take you from procrastinator to productive and bold action taker really does begin with understanding a bit of psychology and why we do what we do, and the reasons behind why we aren't taking action. So this first episode is going to dive into that. So first things first, why do we do what we do? Well, our brains have evolved to be motivated by one of 3 things. And that is because these 3 things increased our odds of surviving back in the caveman days. So these 3 things you will hear referred to as the motivational triad. And essentially, they are to conserve energy, to avoid pain and discomfort, and to seek pleasure. And they make perfect sense, right? Because food was scarce back then. We didn't have an Uber Eats or an Ocado grocery delivery that could drop food right off to our cave door in unlimited quantities and at any time of the day or night. And our brains do use a lot of energy up, particularly doing complex tasks or new tasks. So conserving energy in the caveman days was a smart move. It meant we survived until we could get more food. So nowadays, anything that essentially means the opposite of conserving energy, the brain will not be motivated to do it. The second thing our brains are motivated to do is to avoid pain and discomfort. And this also makes perfect sense, because avoiding pain and discomfort meant avoiding danger and risk and staying safe. So anything nowadays that can be interpreted as a threat or an uncomfortable situation is also typically avoided by the brain. And lastly, we evolved mechanisms for rewarding behaviours that basically sought out anything that was pertinent to our survival. So connection with others, which was useful for safety and reproducing, we would get rewarded for finding. Warmth, food, shelter, drink, all very useful for survival, we would get rewarded for seeking those things out too. And that reward was in the form of dopamine, a chemical that's been linked to the experience of pleasure. And so, of course, nowadays, anything that is interpreted by the brain as something that could deliver pleasure is something to be motivated by. So all of these things make logical sense. And it really is what underpins all of our behaviours. Because if our natural tendencies are to seek short-term pleasure, avoid discomfort and pain and negative emotion, not feeling great that fits into that category, and conserve energy, basically every single thing that doesn't work with the brain in this regard becomes a challenge for us to do. Our brain naturally wants to avoid it. Or if our environment presents easier, more comfortable, more pleasant, safer options with guarantees of dopamine along the way, then our brain will, of course, be motivated towards that instead. The problem with entrepreneurship, however, is that it, by default, requires a lot of hard work, challenging tasks, unknowns, risks, discomfort, a lot of energy, and a lot of foregoing short-term pleasure for long-term prosperity and success. And there is also a part of the human condition that is driven towards growth and fulfilling our potential, despite the inevitable discomfort and hardship along the way. So we often find ourselves taking that scary first step towards this growth and fulfilling our potential, and then have to deal with all the brain's resistance to everything else that is required in order to build and scale that business. So the key to getting things done, being super productive, taking bold, scary actions that have risks associated with them, and building a successful business is really learning how to overcome our brain's natural tendencies and our nervous system in some situations, and learning how to work with them in others. So how do we do that? We first have to understand and be aware of the particular situation that we are faced with. We then have to understand how our brains are interpreting that situation and what emotional response that interpretation is causing within our nervous system. We can then see the effect it is having on how we are showing up or not showing up. And then we can identify the impact it is having on our lives, and we can look to change it. So this might sound complicated, but it doesn't have to be. Because in simple terms, our brains interpret the world via a thought. That thought creates a feeling in our body. That feeling is what drives our action to do or not do anything, and what we do or we don't do creates our results. The challenge really comes in when trying to figure out and change the thought that is the root cause of what is stopping us from taking action. Because sometimes we aren't aware of how our brains are interpreting something. We aren't aware of what we are thinking. We just notice we aren't taking action on something, or we notice we don't feel good about something. Sometimes the thought is deep within the subconscious. Sometimes, even if we find it, we aren't aware that it is just a thought, and we actually believe it's reality. And that is because our thoughts are shaped by our cultural upbringing, our childhood, our societal values, other people's thoughts, our education, our language, our experiences in the world. And we have been practicing them over and over again, many of them the same. So many of them have then become beliefs that we hold about the world. And sometimes we are highly attached to them, which makes it hard to let them go. But the truth is, if we want to take action towards something greater than ourselves, and our interpretation of that task or situation is stopping us from taking action, we do have the power to change that interpretation, to change how we think, to choose how we think, so that we can take that action and get it done. And I'm going to help teach you how to do that in subsequent episodes. Sometimes that will be by encouraging you to change the situation that you are in, as this can make the shift in our thinking a little easier. And that is where some of the practical, actionable strategies come in with regard to helping you manage your projects, your tasks, your productivity, and your time. But a lot of the time, it will be helping you manage that balance between your innermost drive towards growth and fulfilling your potential, and your mind and nervous system having a hissy fit and trying to get you to run in the opposite direction from your business. Because these ultimately are what drives you to either get things done in your business or to procrastinate and hold yourself back. So to wrap this episode up, I would really love for you to think about your own situation in business and your own natural tendencies, and look at it through the lens of understanding yourself as a human with a human brain. And that might sound odd, but if you've never understood why you felt resistance to doing a particular task before, or why you've avoided certain things, or why you are so easily led astray by more pleasant alternatives, this will have hopefully shone a light on some of that for you. What is it that you typically struggle the most with? Can you see which part of the motivational triad is interfering with what you are trying to achieve? Is it that you resist discomfort and fear and let them stop you from taking action? Is it that you let yourself do things all the time that make you feel good in the moment, and you constantly choose those instead of the tasks you know would grow your business faster? Is it that you feel massive dread and resistance over doing tasks that seem overwhelming or too hard? Have a think, spot the pattern, let me know, forgive yourself for being human, and then tune in next week to find out how to start to overcome some of your natural tendencies and start to become your boldest and most productive self. Have a fabulous week, everyone. I'll talk to you soon. Bye. Hey, thanks for listening to the Bold Action Taker podcast with Kirsty Knight. If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, you'll want to make sure that you are in my community, because every single month I offer something for free that will help you. That might be a one-to-one session with me, sometimes a mini training, a workshop, a free resource, or a small gift that will help you either get unstuck or simply add more joy to your business journey. Go to my website, www.kirstyknightcoaching.com/subscribe to make sure you don't miss out.